Now that we've talked about the opening address for this letter, it's time to get into the actual paragraphs and what you're going to be writing. So after we have that Dear Dr. Smith, and then we have regarding the patient, the date of birth, you want to move into this first paragraph, which I call the purpose paragraph. The reader should be able to take from this paragraph everything they need to know in terms of the request. So what exactly are you asking the reader to do? It should be very clear and apparent after they have read that first paragraph. Now, to help with this, there's a couple of things that should be included regardless of the case that you get. You want to make sure that the patient's name appears in that paragraph. Usually it's in that first sentence right away. The situation, that should also be very briefly included. You're going to talk later and expand on the situation in the following paragraphs, but to get started, this might be what diagnosis the patient has been given, what their situation, so maybe they had an injury or they have condition or symptoms. You're going to very, very briefly put that in that first paragraph. Finally, the request. This usually comes either in that first sentence or towards the end of that purpose paragraph. You're going to very politely and formally phrase your request, being very clear and specific what you want the reader to do as a result of providing all this information about the patient. So let's take a look at some examples. What does this actually look like? And what I'll emphasize here is there's no one correct way to phrase this first paragraph, but here are some ideas to get you started. Here in this first one, thank you for agreeing to see Nancy Hughes, who suffered a back injury in April. A couple of things to notice. We have the patient's name. That's great. Also, we have the situation. So what happened to her? Why does she need further care and so forth? She suffered a back injury in April. So make sure you are including those details briefly about the situation. We have your assessment and further management of her condition would be appreciated. So a couple of things to note. The request is very specific. Instead of just asking for, your follow-up on her situation would be appreciated, we have specific nouns here: assessment, management. And those will come directly from the case notes. At the bottom, you'll have that description of what you need to ask the person to do. You should be taking that language and forming it into that request. Also notice a couple of things about politeness and formality. When you're phrasing a request, you should be using the modals would and could. So you don't want to phrase a request as you need to do this, can you do this, you must do this, I need you to do this. Those aren't formal and polite enough for this context. Instead, the most polite way to ask for something is to say would be appreciated in this case. Notice also, so the use of gratitude is also tightly connected with politeness in English. So this opening part, thank you for agreeing to see Nancy Hughes, by using that politeness gratitude marker, that also contributes to the formality as well. But there isn't only one way to write this, so I give you a second example here. I am writing to refer Nancy Hughes for assessment of her back injury, which she sustained in April. Notice that the key points are still here. So we still have the patient name, we still have the situation, and then that request will come after. We have part of the request as well here for assessment, and then we have your further management of her condition would be appreciated. Again, that phrasing of the request with the modal would is, I would say, the most polite way to ask something in that professional tone. So with that, my recommendations, use those three components, patient's name, situation, and request, to guide your formation of the purpose paragraph. Make sure you're carefully reading those case notes as to what the request is. Make it specific in your choice of nouns or verbs. And also make sure that how you're phrasing the request is both polite and formal, and it's appropriate for the context of writing that referral letter or the other types of letters you're writing. After this, we're going to move into the other content paragraphs, and we'll talk a little bit about how grammar comes into play and things like that. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. Also, click that notification bell so that you get updated when I release those next videos. I will see you in the next one.